That's pretty amazing. Now, it sounds like what you're describing is the singularity, which is a concept you put forth before, and I believe your initial projection was that was somewhere around 2049. And I wonder if you could describe what that concept is for those who haven't heard it, and what your current thoughts are on it.
Well, it starts with this concept of the exponential growth of information technology, which we've been discussing. And if you follow that out, by 2045, we will multiply the overall intelligence of the human-machine civilization, which is already a human-machine civilization today, but we will multiply our intelligence a billionfold by that time, 2045. That's such a profound singular transformation that we borrow this metaphor from physics, and we're really referring to the event horizon. In a physics singularity, there's a theoretical point of infinity at the middle, but actually there's no real infinity because that's impossible in quantum mechanics. But what there is an event horizon, which is finite in size. In fact, it can be quite large if you have a big black hole. And beyond that event horizon, it's very hard to see because any information that goes in there is trapped by gravity. So that's the physics singularity. So in this case, this future time is so profound and involves such a transformation that it's very hard to see beyond. Nonetheless, though, just as we can actually use our intelligence today to talk about what life would be like if you fell into a physics black hole, we can actually describe what you would see and so on. We have enough intelligence to do that. We can do the same thing with this historical singularity and describe what things will be like. The fact that we will, for example, be able to back up our minds, our brains. That sounds very fantastic, but we think it's very routine. We would think it's irresponsible not to back up our computers. It's not a metaphor. It's not poetry to say there's information in our brains. That's actually literally the case, and yet it's not backed up. People 100 years from now will think it's pretty amazing. People actually went through the day and didn't back up their mind file. It seems disturbing. So we can talk about lots of implications, but the singularity is kind of the end result of this exponential growth, and it gets to a pretty fantastic point in the 2040s. And at that point, we will really have radical life extension. At the tail end of the third bridge, the nanotechnology bridge, we will have access to the information in our brains, and we'll be able to back it up and restore it if necessary.
So, by implication, of course, that you'll be able to transfer that outside of your body and essentially transfer your intelligence or consciousness, or is this leap to suggest that the consciousness could also be transferred into a different system of holding that to continue it further along the biological limitations?
Yeah, that's a contentious topic. It's a philosophical one, but it's going to become a real practical issue. It's been kind of a polite philosophical debate that goes back to the Platonic dialogues. What is the nature of consciousness? Actually, more importantly, what is the nature of identity? Because even if I were to prove to your satisfaction that if we took your mind file and reinstantiated it in a computer over here, and you were convinced, yes, that new entity is conscious, but actually a more important question is that me, or is that you? If you came to me in the morning and said, "Good news, Ray, we succeeded in scanning your brain last night, and we've recreated you in this computer over here. We don't need your old crummy body anymore." I may disagree with that perspective because I'm still here, and I'll wish the new Ray well, and he'll probably do a lot better than I will, but my consciousness still is with this body. So we could talk for hours or years about this issue. I do have ideas about it. I'm actually writing a book on that very subject called How the Mind Works and How to Build One. And the reason I refer to it as a mind rather than a brain is a brain is a mind that's conscious and has identity. And ultimately, it's a philosophical issue. But that's not to say it's not a real issue. It is a real issue.
Excellent. Well, that's one could almost view it, though, not necessarily as an alternate ego or identity, but almost as a child, where when you bear children, of course, you're sharing your genetics with them, but here you're sharing your information.
It's much right. It's much more a clone of the real you than a biological clone. I mean, a biological clone is not you.
Mm-hmm.
We already have biological clones. They're called identical twins. They happen to be the same age, but we don't consider them the same person. They have different experiences. They may be similar. But there's also stories of identical twins that are raised apart and have very different experiences. And we find that, some things are similar about them, some things are different. So if you were to make a genetic clone, that would just be an identical twin separated in time. But here it's a much more confounding philosophical issue. But by the way, there's a movie about me and my ideas that addresses this very question and also the impact on life extension and health extensively. It's called Transcendent Man. You can see the trailer, get information about it at transcendentman.com. It's been the #2 movie in the country on iTunes. It's available on iTunes, on Movies on Demand. DVDs will be available in May.
Okay, it's not in the theaters, is it?
No, it's being distributed online.
Okay.
Movies on Demand, iTunes,
Okay.
and DVD.
Sounds fascinating.
We did do a worldwide tour of theaters, and it sold out all over the world, actually.
So the singularity is obviously many decades away, and there'll be events that eventually lead up to it. I'm wondering if you could...
But keep in mind that it's not like nothing happens and in 2045.
No, I understand. That was the intention of the question.
Right. It's happening now. Technology is already very impressive. I mean, look at the revolutions that Facebook and other social networks have spawned just in the last few weeks.
So you're describing this broader principle of Moore's law, the law of accelerating. Is it law of accelerating technologies or
law of accelerating returns?
With respect to technology, law of and that's just a universal principle. So with this universal principle intact, that really predicts this very solid exponential growth in all areas. I'm wondering if you could outline for us the likely ones that we'll see in the very near future and the ones after that, to sort of continue to validate your ability to effectively predict these changes towards eventually the singularity that you described.
Well, virtual reality is going to become much more realistic over the next 5 years already. I mean, if you look at video games and virtual worlds like Second Life, they're becoming more and more realistic. But a lot of them are on a screen over here. But now with the advent of three-dimensional TV and motion capture like Kinect from Microsoft, where as you move around, the computer can detect your movement, you can actually be in the action and actually be fully immersed in a three-dimensional environment. So that's coming. And it's not just going to be a game, it's going to be a way of communicating. So you and I are now in a somewhat crude visual auditory virtual reality environment. I have actually a more sophisticated technology called Teleportech, where if I address an audience, I can actually establish eye contact with them, and I look three-dimensional, and as I move around, they see me moving against their local background. But those kinds of technologies where we have really full immersion, where we can be together even far apart, we can enter virtual environments, is going to become very realistic, certainly over the next decade. In terms of health, we were talking about biotechnology. We will see real fruits of being able to reprogram biology. Very close at hand are a lot of these stem cell therapies, because I know people walking around right now who've had their heart rejuvenated, whereas it always was an axiom: if you damage your heart in a heart attack, that's it. I mean, you're not going to recover that heart muscle, but that's now been shown to be reversed with stem cell therapies, and that's going to be applicable to every organ. So we're going to see tremendous progress. I know a lot of exciting startups that are involved with these technologies.
When do you think we'll see a replacement for the pancreas? That would seem to be an early one, or pancreatic cell islet cells to cure type 1 diabetes.
They need to both reproduce pancreatic islet cells, which is actually the easier part of the problem. More complicated is to stop the autoimmune disorder that destroyed them in the first place, because that will destroy any new pancreatic islet cells. That's in fact why they were encapsulated in these nanospheres, to protect them from the immune system, which was actually out to destroy them. But they're making progress on that as well. I think over the next 10 years you will see that solved, but I think even before that we'll see actually small device that is an artificial pancreas that we can implant. We already have insulin pumps. We have continuous glucose monitors. We know the algorithm that's been documented that the pancreas follows. It's more complicated than a thermostat, but not a lot more complicated. And so we can develop a full loop system that will continuously monitor glucose levels and put out insulin in a controlled fashion. So, I mean, that's coming. And in fact, experimental versions of that exist. And I think over 10 years, RNA interference and gene therapies will be deployed. We will make a lot of progress in 10 years, and I think within 15 years, it'll be a very different era in being able to use all of these types of therapies: RNA interference, gene therapy, stem cell therapies, destroying cancer with destroying cancer stem cells, and many other types of ideas in the broad rubric of reprogramming biology.